On va commencer. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue, merci d'être venus. Moi je me présente, je suis John Thiriet, je suis consultant chez Selenza. Je fais pas mal de mobile, on reviendra sur ça plus tard. Et je veux encore vous remercier d'être venus aujourd'hui. Aujourd'hui on va parler de Xamarin. On a la chance d'avoir des speakers qui viennent à la fois de Xamarin et de Microsoft, bien qu'il y ait eu le rachat. Ils ont toujours leur petite étiquette Xamarin. Voilà. Donc aujourd'hui, je vais laisser pour le moment Arnaud Girard présenter, faire la petite introduction, et puis nous, on se revoit tout à l'heure.
Bonjour à tous, merci d'être venus. Je suis donc Arnaud Girard, responsable commercial des offres de développement et cloud chez Microsoft. Donc on est ravis d'accueillir nos collègues de Xamarin parce que ça fait quelques années qu'on espérait les voir arriver dans le giron Microsoft. Donc c'est vraiment une bonne nouvelle qu'aujourd'hui on puisse avoir cette présentation complètement commune et de surcroît avec Selenza, nos partenaires très importants dans le domaine. Juste un petit mot vraiment très rapide d'introduction. Historiquement, vous le savez, Microsoft a toujours cherché à proposer la meilleure expérience, je dirais, aux développeurs, notamment en termes d'outils et d'IDE. Mais c'est vrai qu'on l'a tous et on l'expérimente, le monde change, le monde a changé. Et sous l'impulsion de notre nouveau CEO, enfin il n'est plus si nouveau que ça maintenant, parce que ça fait déjà plus de 2 ans qu'il est en place, Satya Nadella, on cherche à répondre aux grands enjeux de ce monde et on a appelé ça rejoindre le monde cloud first, mobile first, en bon français, puisque après vous aurez une présentation en anglais. Pour répondre à ces enjeux-là, on a vraiment adapté notre solution afin d'accueillir tous les développeurs sur notre plateforme, que ce soit autour de l'IDE, en proposant un certain nombre de solutions qui sont plus seulement des solutions pour l'entreprise, mais également pour les développeurs individuels, et également sur tout ce qui est solutions d'industrialisation pour tirer le meilleur parti du cloud. Donc c'est autour de cette thématique-là qu'on va passer la journée ou tout au moins la matinée ensemble. Comment industrialiser vos développements dans le cloud, comment tirer le meilleur parti des solutions Microsoft au sens large, inclus bien évidemment Xamarin, comment notre partenaire Selenza peut éventuellement vous aider sur ces thématiques-là, en focusant vraiment sur la partie mobile, même si on en est bien conscient, tout ça fait partie d'une dynamique de DevOps mobile qui est vraiment la thématique du moment auquel l'ensemble de nos clients doivent répondre, et on est heureux de pouvoir les accompagner sur ces thématiques-là avec Selenza. Voilà, j'ai cherché à faire rapide pour laisser la parole aux experts. Je serai disponible avec mon équipe, il y a Jean-François et Laetitia qui sont au fond de la salle. On sera là, bien entendu, à la pause et au déjeuner. Si vous avez des questions par rapport à Microsoft, on sera très heureux d'y répondre. Voilà.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Matt, and that's all the French you're going to get from me today. I'm Matt Larson. It's a pleasure to be here. I look after our consulting partners throughout Europe. I'm based in London with my colleague Neil, and looking forward to spending some time with you here this morning.
Good morning, everyone. So Neil Smith, Matt and I are both based out of our London Xamarin office. We'll soon be integrated into the wonderful world of Microsoft in another office in London. It's great to be here, so we're looking forward to share with you the journey that we've been on around Xamarin to get from a startup to a fully integrated organization. So am I beginning now? Okay, so what we're going to start to talk about is in relation to specifically the journey that we've been on and the kind of industry and what we've actually seen in the marketplace. But I'm going to start with a personal story. So who are parents here? I mean, there's a lot of youngsters in the audience, but I'm certainly, I've got 3 children. I've got a youngest son called Charles, I have an eldest called Daisy, and I have a middle child called Nancy. And this is her. So this was when she was 5 years old. Now, at that time, Nancy was the only thing that I saw when I arrived home from work. She used to run up to me, grab me, say, "Hi, Dad." She'd bring all her bears down. It was a wonderful experience. The sad thing is that was 10 years ago, and now she's grown up. So instead of me being the person that she actually wants to see, the thing that really gets her excited It's that device on the right-hand side. That's the thing that is her oxygen. She simply can't exist without a mobile device. Now, being a bad parent, she's 15 now, you'll notice that it's an iPhone 4S. As a parent, you don't give them brand new devices. So actually, even today, she even texted me to say, Dad, it's just not working anymore. But the funny thing was, she texted me on her phone to say it wasn't working. There we go. So now the reason why I'm mentioning Nancy is because some of the material that you might have seen for quite some time ago, so I'm sure this is quite old, an old photograph which talks about the inauguration of the Pope in both 2005 and 2013. And you can clearly see something's very different between both of those. Now, the reason why I'm showing you that is because I showed this to Nancy. And the point I made was, isn't it a shame that people just aren't living the moment and experiencing, you know, this one-off event that they may see in their whole lifetime? And she said, but Dad, they're looking at it through their phones, so that's kind of okay. So even though they were there, they're staring at a screen. So what that basically tells you is that mobility is so habitual, it's the first thing that people pull out of their pocket when there's an event going on, okay? Now, I'm as guilty as Nancy is about mobile. So 12 months ago, I actually transferred over from IBM. At that time, I was part of their mobility team across Europe, deploying IBM mobile technology. And actually, at that time, we were even integrating with Xamarin. So when I first joined Xamarin, flew out to San Francisco to join the organization. And at that time, there were certain things that we were starting to condition ourselves. So if I needed a taxi, then Uber was the thing that I was going to use. If I needed to book a hotel or accommodation, then Airbnb would be the way that I would actually access that without any human interaction to make it the most efficient way possible. We were working huge amount of hours being a startup, so therefore you needed food being brought to you, and TaskRabbit was used, for example, of grabbing some food and delivering it to our offices at midnight. Now, that was 12 months ago, but now I'm a total digital native, meaning that I simply can't exist without a huge amount of apps that aren't deeply immersive for a long user journey, but what they are pockets of productivity that just helps me exist as an individual, makes me more efficient, can organize my life on the go, but also can start to manage my work priorities on a regular basis. So it means that these are the things that really make me much more efficient in the workplace. Everyone is becoming a digital native now. So the information here on the left-hand side, you're seeing smartphone users in billions. You'll notice the sheer scale of 7x growth in a short period of 4 years, and a 10x growth associated with applications that are built in the marketplace. The growth and the size of the app market will simply get bigger. This problem is not going away at all for enterprises and end customers to use mobility. Benedict Evans is an individual that I strongly recommend you start to follow his blogs. He comes up with some fantastic analysis, and this is one interesting piece. The graph in the green shows the number of PCs that are shipped on a quarterly basis, and you'll notice that there is a peak that occurs on quite a regular time, and that's just the general renewals of the PC. Now, there were two major events that occurred. Release of the first iPhone in 2007, and then the big news was around Xamarin being launched as a business in 2011. So, if you actually overlay the device shipments versus PCs, you can see that within an incredibly short period of time of just 2 years, handsets, tablets, phones were now becoming much more popular than even a well-established PC market. And that growth is obviously continuing. Mobile has already happened. It's not something we're kind of readying ourselves for. So if we actually look at what's occurred versus other booming technology markets. 10 times faster than the PC boom of the 80s, 3 times faster than social networking, and even twice faster than the internet boom of the 90s. So it's a staggering set of data that we've got there associated with that. There's been some analysis done by IDC whereby XamarinDay is speaking with end customers, large enterprises down to small boutique software organizations. And the thing that's really driving their growth is around the sort of data that we've got here associated with mobile-first applications. So the study that's produced by IDC is quoting that by 2017, 100% of B2C applications, end consumer applications, and 75% of enterprise applications will all be built mobile first, and then if they find that there is an additional route or channel of consumption, they will then build that as a secondary thought. Mobile first all the time. A lot of organizations are now struggling with the fact that the demand coming through from their end customers, their suppliers, and their actual employees are driving an unprecedented amount of demand coming through that's putting pressure on IT departments. Gartner have done some analysis and have looked at the whole market, interviewed CIOs across the world. And right now, the prediction is that by 2017, the capacity of IT departments to meet the demand of the end customers, suppliers, and enterprise users is going to be outweighed by a factor of 5. So there's a huge amount of gap there where efficiencies are required to do things quicker, to do things of a much higher quality, and to make sure that the total cost of ownership of that is as efficient and as low as possible. Another bit of analysis as well is that over the years, certainly within IBM and Microsoft as well, the IT budgets of organizations are simply staggering. So a statement whereby IDC are researching that 25% of that budget is actually going to be spent on mobile-first solutions, then that is a huge market there that is ripe for helping those organizations realize that dream and making the most of that investment. There is no such thing as just one app. We have multiple operating systems, number of different handsets, carriers, networks, different devices that they can actually run on, form factors. Now, an organization trying to address having an app that works against this complete fragmentation is deeply challenging, not just for a B2C customer, so because you have no control over end user devices, but actually even for an internal organization that has hundreds of thousands of mobile workers out in the field where they've implemented a BYOD policy, bring your own device. So this challenge, irrespective of just building the apps, is incredibly important to make sure that those apps are a wonderful and brilliant user experience for all of these devices and the broad range of fragmentation. Matt, as he comes up, will go deeper into that particular topic and will just explain the sheer scale of the problem to customers and partners. So now, the first challenge that we saw in the marketplace was how does an organization be aware within the market associated with just having a B2C application out there, so to show that their brand is able to be interacted with, you can buy goods, you can research whatever you need. Now those organizations have now shifted where they need to start to think about the deep engagement of their suppliers and also the engagement of their end users, the enterprise. So the need now is to do things faster, quicker, of higher quality, and also at significant scale. So it's not just about building an app and shipping it, it's about the whole life cycle of delivering a portfolio of applications that doesn't stop. there's continuous innovation associated with those. So if we actually look at the challenges for IT, we're finding that there's such a huge demand for mobility in terms of software. Users demanding still world-class user experiences. Years ago, if you were a person booking timesheets, booking a hotel, you know, as part of your day-to-day work, finding a room in a large building like this, that user experience was normally quite clunky, but now every consumer has now got to the point where they simply demand a brilliant user experience, irrespective of whether it's a consumer-facing customer, a B2B, or a B2E application. And then enterprises are going mobile on multiple platforms. They simply can't control the devices anymore. The carrier, the manufacturer of that hardware, the screen size, the operating systems, it's deeply hard to do that. So therefore, the questions that a lot of those organizations are asking is, how do I build hundreds of apps in a factory-based model that are totally native, so there is no compromise in terms of the user experience around leveraging hardware. So 3D Touch works on an iPhone. You can kick off a camera whenever you need from the application. You can do fingerprint recognition to do Apple Pay or whatever you need to do. So the native experience has to be a brilliant one and deeply performant as well. And then the final part is, well, how do you do that without actually having tripling your work? So how do you build one app that then runs beautifully natively and performant across Android, iOS, and Windows Phone? So the things that we're going to talk to you about today is addressing those very 3 points. Now, there was a journey that we went on as an independent business, and it's no surprise to any of you, the reason why we're here is because of the acquisition. Now, Satya has been deeply passionate about Xamarin. And you know, he's quoted here, there won't be any one device that controls us. In the future, computing will be everywhere. The cloud orchestrates that mobility. So where Xamarin is concerned, there is a strong reason why we were acquired, which is around its cloud first and mobile first, and Satya is testament to that. So what was the journey that we went on? So we were actually launched in 2011. That was by Nat, our CEO, and Miguel, our CTO, sadly rather younger than I am now. They started releasing incremental benefits associated with the platform. Xamarin Test Cloud was integrated into the business 2 years in. Xamarin 4 was released that started to create a full lifecycle solution. And then there were 2 massive events that occurred this year. The first one was on the 28th of February this year. That was the announcement that we were being acquired by Microsoft. And the second one was that Microsoft's Build conference, then it was announced that Xamarin was free for all, meaning the Xamarin platform was there to be consumed by anyone that was a Visual Studio user. So the value of Visual Studio rocketed up. Now, Satya was tweeting about that. Any app, any OS, any dev, the truly universal developer tools welcome Xamarin. Overnight, the increase in interest multiplied by a factor of 3, and that is continuing to grow. So it's a very good place to be if you're a business partner, and it's a fantastic place to be if you're an end customer that really wants to back their digital transformation on Xamarin and Microsoft. The developer community is always incredibly challenging in this area, but the main themes were, what took you so long? Why was it so long that Xamarin until we're actually acquired? So incredibly positive from the big business partners, the systems integrators that we've got as well. Again, incredibly positive about things because now they could leverage their Microsoft practice and enhance it and enrich it with a mobility conversation for their end customers. So deeply powerful for them as well. So what was the result? The result was an enterprise-grade mobile lifecycle offering. So hopefully the majority of you have actually seen this before, but if you haven't, then Matt will be on stage shortly just to go through each of these in more detail and start to bring it to life associated with each of those. So the first thing is, it's around building cross-platform. You build it once, you distribute it to multiple devices using Visual Studio and Xamarin. You then enrich those applications using Azure. So you're bringing in user authentication, push technology, a huge amount of building blocks that have been done for you to make the implementation of the first app fast and of high quality and of enterprise grade as well. Then there's testing, the need to do two things: automate the tests so you're not having to tap through devices. And the second thing is that once you've got that framework in place, then you then distribute that testing across a huge set of devices, varying different operating systems, different form factors in terms of screen sizes, and different manufacturers as well. The third phase is that you're in a business as usual environment where mobile DevOps truly comes into its own. It's around code control, making sure that you're deploying the right code out into the market and being visible in terms of where there's problems and where you need to address issues very, very quickly. One of the things that you obviously see that's probably unprecedented in the market around technology is the fact that if you ship a B2C app, very quickly your users will tell you whether they're happy with it or not. It simply doesn't really happen in many other industries. So, and then the final piece is around, we've prided ourselves on being a technology-first company. We were never there to be a systems integrator, an organization that implemented applications. Our business partners were there to do that. So we made sure that everything was easy to consume from an education perspective to implement a consistent level of quality associated with Xamarin development. So Xamarin University was the final piece on the right-hand side, and that continues to be at the core of Microsoft's strategy around establishing skill sets within businesses and partners. Now, we have a lot of good user stories. These are not just slides. We want to bring it to life with a few good stories. Alaskan is very much mobile only and cloud first. They view themselves as a startup, even though they're incredibly well-established business. So what we've got a story from that organization that really talks about the problems they had, the mindset that they've got now associated with mobile and enterprise grade mobility, and then actually what they've done about it and how they're leveraging Xamarin to address that. So we're going to watch the video now. With sound. Bear with me, everyone. Okay. Where is the sound? Huh. Do we have a sound engineer here? Okay. Interesting.
Creating us in the marketplace.
Did you take that out?
Company. Our stated goal is to be the easiest airline to fly by 2017. And so as we invest in innovation, as we invest in tools, whether it's mobile, whether it's cloud, we think about how is that differentiating us in the marketplace and how is that making us an easier airline for customers to experience.
As Alaska Airline developer, we are very adventurous. We love to try new things, and we always want to see what's out there in the consumer market and see how we can bring it back to the company. And we want to take that knowledge, apply to our operational application so that we can improve our airline to become an even better airline.
The airport, the hotel, the airplane are our employees' office, and they're our frontline employees. And so we see mobility as a key to enabling that connection with the customer. Hopper was created to enable our employees to figure out day of flight, what flights they can get onto and what destinations they can go to. We built the Hopper app to make it really easy for our employees to have that information in the palm of their hand.
most companies are struggling with trying to pick a device to develop on, and whether it's the iOS platform or Android platform or Windows platform, we have an opportunity to pick Xamarin and not to choose a specific endpoint device. You can actually adopt Xamarin and code once and deploy to all tools and all endpoint devices.
This allows us to really focus on the features, but not like individual platform languages.
It is a native experience. We are able to integrate things like Touch ID into our apps, push notifications, all these native experiences that allow us to deliver value quickly.
Not only is it an acceleration for core development, it also has extensions to deliver better quality from a testing perspective.
We use Test Cloud to be able to test it on many different devices. We're leveraging automation to run through the suite of integration tests all the way to deployment. You don't have to think about that stuff anymore. You just think about what's the experience that you want to deliver to your users.
The feedback that I'm getting from my developers is really, really positive. The teams are excited at the rate and pace and velocity at which they're able to deliver solutions.
It's just a great feeling that I can help others with technology, with my knowledge.
And there's nothing better to see when someone slides and puts a 5-star rating and puts the feedback and says, oh my gosh, you guys just delivered this awesome feature, thank you so much. It makes my life better.
There we go. So hopefully that gives you a nice bit of insight into the type of customer success that we've had so far. Matt's now going to come up. We're going to switch over where he's going to go deeper into each of those delivery stages of the mobile lifecycle. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Neil. So before I jump in here, I want to see a quick show of hands. How many on a scale of 1 to 10 would say they're a 10 in their Xamarin knowledge? All right, how about 8? 7? Okay, all right. Who's below a 3? All right, good. And who has a Xamarin monkey? Okay, are there some outside? Do we have some? We'll have to get some more Xamarin monkeys. But if you've not received a Xamarin monkey yet, I encourage you to do so. We used to have lots, and somehow they've disappeared. I don't know where they've all gone. Maybe John has them all. So good. Well, hopefully this will be a good introduction to those of you who may not be as familiar with Xamarin. And for those who may be more on the 7-8 scale of your understanding of Xamarin, hopefully it will shed some light into the full picture now that we're part of Microsoft as a whole on where things are going and kind of the complete picture that we have to offer today. And so we'll walk through this whole journey. Obviously, we'll start at the beginning with the Xamarin platform, which was our main product and probably what you're most familiar with. So in order to do that, though, just to paint a couple challenges, who's built a mobile app in this room? Okay, good. So typically there's a few challenges that you face when you're starting to build an app. The first is, as Neil mentioned, it's a heterogeneous world. You can't ignore iPhone. You can't ignore Android. Windows Phone is out there as well, and it's something to be considered. So your users are using all of those different platforms, so you can't ignore one of those. The second challenge is that users want native experience. This graph shows that 86% of time users spend on their mobile devices is actually spent in apps as opposed to in the browser. So they expect that native experience. And we've seen classic examples, Facebook probably the most prominent, where they decided to build an HTML5 in the browser type experience, and their app suffered. Mark Zuckerberg, their CEO, went on to say that betting too much on HTML5 and on a non-native experience was the biggest mistake that Facebook had made. They quickly righted that ship. They deliver fully native apps now, and as you probably are aware, Facebook does most of their revenue from advertising on their mobile phone. They have an excellent mobile experience. So they kind of learned the hard way that users really want that native experience. So how do you do this? How do you build a native app across all of these different platforms? We see a couple different ways that people go about doing it. These are the wrong ways. And then we'll talk about how Xamarin enables you to do that in a much more efficient way. But first, people go around what we call the siloed approach, where you've got a team that's in Swift or in Objective-C focused on iOS. You've got a team that's in Java focused on Android. You've got a team in C# focused on Windows. They each have their different tools. They each have their different code bases. And there's not a lot of collaboration going back and forth. If you want to add a new feature, you have to do that multiple times. If you have a bug that you need to fix, you have to fix that multiple times. So while this, this platform-specific approach is great for your users because they get a fully native experience, it's not so great for the development team and for the company building the app because it's very costly, takes a lot of time, and instead of innovating around the app, you're just trying to maintain platform parity between iOS and Android and Windows Phone. So then we see companies switch and they say, okay, this is too hard. Forget 3 different apps. We're just going to write it once and it will run everywhere. We'll use some HTML5 hybrid approach. This is where you've got the phone gaps, the conies, the accelerators that are using some sort of lowest common denominator approach where you get a subset of the APIs. So you may get camera, you may get location, but you're not going to get 100% of all the APIs and native controls that Google and Apple give you. And it's not a native performance, and we'll look at that in just a minute. So while this is a better experience for the developers, at least at the beginning, it's often a subpar experience for your end users. So those are the 2 things that we see most often in the marketplace. Now, how does Xamarin compare to that? Xamarin is essentially the best of both worlds in that it enables you to build more apps faster because you're reusing your code across iOS, Android, and Windows. It enables you to have a completely native but cross-platform solution. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And because of that, as Neil was mentioning, it enables you to build this app factory where you can not only deliver one app and share your code between iOS and Android and Windows, but you can build dozens or hundreds of apps and share that code across all of those apps. So your reuse and your scalability just dramatically increases. So we're going to walk through some points around how this actually happens. But first off, I want to define the word native. People throw around the word native app, and it sometimes has skewed definitions. So when we talk about a native mobile application, we're talking about 3 main things. The first is that it has a completely native user interface. That means a button on iOS is a UI button. It's not some drawn image. It's a completely native button, and it's using that native user interface. The second is that you have high-fidelity API access, meaning all of the APIs and the controls that iOS and Android provide, you have access to all of those APIs. And then finally, we each have a supercomputer that we carry around in our pocket, more powerful than the computers that astronauts use to put people on the moon. And so you should leverage the power of that device, and you should run on the machine and leverage that native performance. So those are the 3 things that we're going to talk about and to why Xamarin allows you to deliver a fully native application. So the first is how you architect your app. So with Xamarin, we're not claiming to be a write once, run everywhere solution. What we tell you, what we encourage you is to build a fully native app and share your code, share as much code as you can across the different platforms. And so you'll see here, there's a shared C# backend. That's your networking layer. That's your data access layer. All of that code is done in C#. And then you'll create different UIs for each platform that you target. It's all done in C#. The UI layer is all done in C# as well. But you'll create separate UIs for each platform that you're targeting. And you do this either in Visual Studio, which we've fully integrated in as part of being acquired by Microsoft. Visual Studio, every version of Visual Studio, whether it's community, professional, enterprise, includes Xamarin right out of the box. So before, there was a Xamarin license required. Now it's all done through Visual Studio. And the second IDE that we have is Xamarin Studio. So if you're on a Mac and you want to build apps with Xamarin, you can use the Xamarin Studio IDE, which is very similar to Visual Studio. So the other approach, and I'll just mention this briefly, is Xamarin Forms. And the only difference with Xamarin Forms is that you're using a shared UI layer where we abstract that UI. So the pieces that you see here that are platform specific will be used in Xamarin Forms, so you're able to share even more code. So what we see, and I'll show you an example of this in a second, we see between 60 and up to 99% shared code depending on how you architect your application. So, and the main takeaway from this, and again, as I mentioned, all Xamarin is essentially doing is taking all of the APIs that are provided to you from Apple and all the APIs provided to you from Google, and we're giving those to you in C#. So it's a comfortable language for you. You can stay in C#, you can stay in Visual Studio, but there's no sacrifices, there's no limitations. Anything you could do in Objective-C or in Java, any native control, any native binding or library or component, you can access all of that in C# with Xamarin in Visual Studio. And we have an amazing track record of maintaining that support. So since iOS 5, we've had same-day support for every new release that iPhone has to offer. So the way that works is, in the summer, Apple will come out with their beta release of the latest operating system. Within 24 hours or so, we'll ship an alpha version of our newest release so that you can start building your app for that latest operating system. And then later in the fall, when Apple goes gold master on their newest release, their newest operating system, we also push out a new version as well. So there's never a lag in terms of waiting to support those new APIs that Apple and Google announce. And we also support the devices of the future. Maybe Google Glass is not the device of the future. Maybe it will be. We'll see. But whatever smartwatch, whatever home controlled device, C# can literally run everywhere. And so when you're building your app in Xamarin, you're not only targeting iOS, Android, and Windows. You're targeting whatever that device is that's coming down the road. You're future-proofing your application. So we've talked about sharing your code, maximizing code reuse. We've talked about full user experience. Let's talk about performance for a second. One of the questions that we often get is, okay, if I'm going to do cross-platform, if I'm going to use Xamarin, there's got to be some performance hit. There's not. So this is a study, a guy called Harry Chung. He was one of the early Google employees. And after he made his millions, he left, wanted to build an application, wanted to do it cross-platform, but had a lot of concerns around the performance of his app. So he took all of these different cross-platform frameworks, built it on the left in blue, you see iOS, on the right in green is Android. He built it in Swift, he built it in Objective-C, he built it in Xamarin, he built it in Accelerator, he built an HTML5 version of his app. And he compared the performance of this mapping app that he built and did some analysis on that. And it's very fascinating. You can look this study up. But you'll see here, Xamarin on iOS is just behind Swift. Outperforms actually Objective-C. And then down here, these are your hybrid HTML5. These are your phone gaps and your HTML5 versions that we talked about earlier. So the performance is drastically better than the hybrid approach. On Android, Xamarin actually outperforms native Java. So even more performant on Android than you would get using the native tooling. So all of this to say that there is no performance degradation with Xamarin. An end user using a Xamarin app would not tell if it's built in Objective-C or in Swift or if it's built in Xamarin. Oh, and his quote is good as well. So his conclusion was there was some magic involved in building Xamarin. It's not magic, it's just really hard working engineers. So what does all this mean in terms of the business implications? If you're sharing code and if you're able to reuse this code, you're going to be more efficient. You'll save time in developing your app. You'll save time in releasing your app, and you'll obviously save costs in that process. So this is a sample case study that we've thrown together. If you've got an Android team and an iOS team, it typically takes them 4 months in a siloed approach. If you do that with Xamarin, you get all 3 platforms in just 3 months. So this is kind of a good random case study, but wanted to show you some real examples from our portfolio of real customers and the amount of time they've saved and the amount of code that they've been able to reuse. So you'll notice there's some, Honeywell, for example, 30% less code. So they chose to focus more on the UI. MRW, which is a transportation company in Spain, used the Xamarin Forms approach. And so they're able to reuse even more code and get to market twice as fast as they otherwise would have been able. So we'll look at some more case studies here in just a minute, but just to give you a feel of the type of code reuse and the type of time and cost savings that you can experience with Xamarin. So in summary, on the Xamarin platform, one language, you're all in C#. You don't have to worry about learning Objective-C and Swift and Java. You have a fully native user experience, a fully performant application, and you're able to deliver these apps, these 5-star applications, at lower costs because you're reusing and sharing that C# code base. Fantastic. So that's the first stop in our journey, building native apps with Xamarin. The second piece, and one that I think has been one of the biggest benefits of us joining Microsoft, is that we now have deeper integration into Azure. And it enables you to enrich your application and get to market even faster because you're leveraging the power of the cloud. And as Neil showed earlier, the cloud is what orchestrates the mobility of your applications. So we're not going to spend a lot of time in this section, as I'm not the Azure expert, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things that Azure enables you to do, and being part of the Microsoft ecosystem makes Xamarin even better. So these are probably some questions that you are thinking about when you're starting to build your application. How do I make my app work offline? How do I send out push notifications? How can I integrate voice search into my app? How can I put my sales team's contents out into their hands while they're out in the field? Now that we're part of Microsoft, we're integrating into all of these things, starting first with Azure, and we'll look at that in more detail. So the story just becomes much more complete as we're part of this broader solution. And one of the things that's surprised me the most joining Microsoft, so I've been in the startup world almost my entire career. I've been working at very small companies. And coming to Microsoft, I kind of expected slow growth. They're going to grow 3 to 5% year over year, and they're slowly moving along. It's this big ship. Azure is incredibly exciting, and the momentum behind Azure has blown me away. We're talking 100, 200% growth year over year. I mean, you can see the number of subscribers that are signing up every month. And the amount of investment that Microsoft is making into building data centers. It's estimated that by 2025, 60% of all computing will happen in the public cloud. And Microsoft is positioned to be a leader in that space and provide that computing for the world. So really quickly, I just wanted to share this quick video with you around how Azure and Xamarin are working together. You're going to start seeing a lot more in this space. But this will highlight a lot of the features that Azure enables you to build into your app that's built in Xamarin.
Developers can build mobile apps with beautiful UX and native performance for Android, iOS, and Windows with Visual Studio and Xamarin. Whether you're building from scratch or extending existing mobile apps, you need a back-end platform that is just as dependable, that works everywhere, every time. A back-end that provides all the building blocks, supports all major mobile dev platforms, and scales to your needs. A back-end platform like Microsoft Azure. Azure allows you to connect your app to enterprise systems and on-premises resources and scale your app to millions of customers across multiple geographies. Azure has a huge number of capabilities, including streamlined integrated developer tools and mobile SDKs, and all the building blocks you need to help you build powerful mobile apps quickly. Azure provides a collection of must-have integrated cloud services such as Azure App Service with mobile apps that help you build engaging mobile apps fast. User authentication provides a way for your application to easily sign in users. An app service supports 5 identity providers right out of the box, including Azure Active Directory, Facebook, Google, Microsoft Account, and Twitter, as well as your own custom identity solution. And with the notification hubs, your apps can broadcast personalized push notifications to millions in minutes, like breaking news, new enterprise messages, and even location-based coupons. Use offline data sync to create robust apps that remain useful when there are network issues, so that users can create and modify data even when they're offline. So what about storage? Whether it's images, photos, documents, or customer records, in the cloud or on-premises, Azure Storage makes it simple to create or integrate the right kind of storage for the task. Azure Storage is massively scalable and accessible from anywhere and from any device, whether your users are online or off. So we know Azure mobile apps can help you speed up the creation of a reliable and scalable backend, but wait, there's more. With just a few lines of code, you can access multiple other cloud services in Azure that can enrich your apps even more, with features such as facial recognition, intelligent bots, visual search, and hundreds of other kinds of advanced functionality. Get your mobile DevOps and continuous integration and delivery process integrated quickly with Visual Studio Team Services and TFS, Hockey App, and Xamarin Test Cloud. As a mobile developer, you have more possibilities than ever before with the power of the cloud at your fingertips. And it's never been easier to harness that power with Microsoft Azure. To learn more, visit azure.com/Xamarin and try Azure for free today.
Awesome. So there you go, a brief introduction into the world of Azure. So moving on in this journey, we've talked about how to build apps, we've talked about how to integrate and to enrich those apps. Now we're getting ready to test our applications. So a quick question here, a lot of you said that you've built an app. How many are, raise your hand if you're guilty of this. When it comes around to the testing piece, you send around an email or ask, who has an Android device that I can borrow? Everybody put your Android devices on my desk, I need to test my app, and you come back with 3 or 4 different devices. That's oftentimes how testing is occurring. But the reality is that this is the world in which your apps are going into. So has anybody ever seen this image before? This is the Android marketplace. This is how many different configurations of Android operating system and Android hardware exist out in there. I think there's 24,000 permutations that exist in the world today. So this is because Sony has a different version of Android, and Samsung has a different flavor, and Motorola has a different flavor, and each one is slightly different. Each operating system is slightly different. And the other challenge is that users on Android tend to not update to the latest operating system as frequently. On iOS, 90% of iOS users are on the most current release of iOS. On Android, it's the opposite. Only 10% of users are on the latest version of Android. So your users are going to be somewhere in here. Maybe it's not the entire graph, but it's likely more than just a couple of Android phones that you scrounge around the office. And the problem is biggest on Android, but it's also becoming a problem on iOS. We have iOS 6, you have iOS 6S, you have iOS 6 Plus, and different operating systems in there as well. So testing on this vast array of fragmentation in devices is a challenge. And the other challenge is that users come to expect new releases and new features much more frequently than we did when we were in the PC world, where Microsoft would come out with a new operating system every few years. We'd have a new release of Windows every couple years. Now, this is how fast the most popular applications are releasing new versions of their app. It's in days, not in months or years. And so in order to do this type of development, in order to compete with those experiences that our users are looking for, you need a complete DevOps solution. And Test Cloud is key to this. And what we've seen is that companies that are using this type of DevOps solution, integrating with Test Cloud and using some of the other tools that we'll talk about today, are able to get a mean time to resolution, meaning your user finds a bug, it's identified in code, it's fixed, a new release is pushed. They're able to do that about 24 times faster than if you're just relying on manual processes. So those are the two challenges. How do you test across all of these different devices, and how do you do that in a very fast and scalable way? That's why we've produced and launched over the past several years a product called Xamarin Test Cloud. Now, Xamarin Test Cloud is essentially two things. It enables you to create local test scripts. So locally on your machine, either you connect a mobile device to your computer, or you use an emulator, and then in C# using an NUnit test, or using an open source scripting language called Calabash, you create a local UI test script. So this means I see the home screen, I enter my password, I enter my email, I hit next, I swipe right, I scroll down. Anything that a user could do in your application, you can actually automate that and create a script that automates that for your user. Now, once you've created that, you can upload that test script and upload your app into the Xamarin Test Cloud. And in our device lab, we have physical devices, around 2,500, I think, at the latest count, of iOS and Android devices, and we'll take a look at what those are here in just a second. So we've solved that problem of trying to cover the entire marketplace. So it's those two things. Create your test script and then upload it into the device cloud. And then what we do is to take screenshots of your app at every step along the way. And the important thing about this is that your app does not have to be built in Xamarin in order to leverage Xamarin Test Cloud. If you've got an Objective-C app, if you've got a PhoneGap app, you can still test that using the Xamarin Test Cloud. So this is a quick screenshot of what it looks like. You'll see over here on the left, this is my test script, my user flow through the application. And then here, you either see videos or screenshots of your app at each step along the way. Here, this is an example of a failure. For some reason, this app crashed. And you're able to dig into the code. It takes you to the stack trace so that you can see what was going wrong with the application. And very quickly get a view of what your app looks like, what's going wrong, how you can improve your app with these beautiful screenshots and this beautiful layout. And here's I think this slide's a bit old. I think our count is now 2,500. But again, these are not emulators. They're not virtual machines. These are physical devices. And you see the count over there that splits between the Android and the iOS operating system. Now, we talked about that speed to market. It is a public cloud, and so you'll be sharing time with other people. But we have what we call the Tier 1 devices. So for an iOS 6 device that's running iOS 9, an iPhone 6 running iOS 9, we have 20 instances of that set up so that you can test your app. We split your test up and it tests across all those devices simultaneously so that you get your results back even faster. And so before I move on there, the pricing, just to kind of give an idea around that, the pricing is around concurrent devices. So you purchase one instance, one concurrent device, and then you can test as many devices through that concurrent device, but you do that one at a time. Or you can buy 2 concurrent devices, and then you'll get your results back even faster because if you're testing on 10 devices, you'll do those 2 at a time instead of 1 at a time. So check this out on Xamarin Test Cloud. Our pricing is all on our webpage. It's very easy to get started, and you can learn a little bit more about that there. Here's some quick examples from a few of our customers. We're very fortunate to count Slack and Pinterest, some very focused and developer-friendly applications that are built, that are leveraging the power of Xamarin Test Cloud. And to bring that to life a little more, I just wanted to show this.
What we like about Xamarin is that it is a platform and a tool, not only for code development, but also for analytics, also for test quality.
We chose Test Cloud because we needed to provide a solution that was going to be completely bulletproof for the Beyond 12 team. Once it goes live, a failure was not an option.
If you're doing manual testing, there is a lot of room for error, especially as your app becomes more complex and starts to use more features on different operating systems.
We were unable to go manually test and review how the application looked and flowed on each of those devices, so there were numerous cases where especially visual issues like buttons being overlaid, were addressed very quickly through the Xamarin Test Cloud.
If you think about speed to market at high quality, this is a tool that's allowing us to do that.
We chose Xamarin Test Cloud because we wanted a way to scale our testing across many different devices and many different apps. And we also wanted a way to automate testing as much as possible.
Test Cloud allowed us to write over 250 automated tests to test over 90% of the application in an automated way. This means every time that we're creating a new feature or fixing a bug, we're able to run those regressions on a wide variety of devices, way more than we could ever do manually.
Test Cloud was for us a really game changer. Our release cycles could become really short. Instead of doing a week of regression testing, we could just put it inside of our nightly builds, get results back from that, and if something broke, we could easily fix that. We can say with confidence our release is stable. We know Xamarin Test Cloud is there to support us in order to check if everything's still working.
We pride ourselves on having a really great score. 90% of our reviews are 4-star or more. You want to make sure that when you're releasing an app, it has as few bugs as possible and works for the largest number of people as possible. So Xamarin Test Cloud enables us to release feeling confident that that will be the case.
Fantastic. So that's a whirlwind tour of Xamarin Test Cloud. John, in his presentation a bit later, I think is going to actually give a demo of what it looks like to build an app or build a test in Test Cloud and then upload that to our device cloud. So stay tuned there. But a fantastic product and something that customers are very excited about. So moving on in this journey, we've built our app, we've integrated it with Azure, we've now tested it in Test Cloud, and now we're shipping it out to our customers. And the biggest challenge here is that likely you're never going to ship a perfect app on the first try. Obviously, you'll get very close as you're testing in Test Cloud, so you're going to find those bugs before your users do, but likely there will be something out there that some user on some obscure Android device has troubles with, and that person will go to the Android App Store and they'll leave a very helpful review that says something like, "This app sucks." And you as the developer will have no idea what went wrong and why that person had a poor experience. And so this next piece around Hockey App and Visual Studio Team Services is what enables you to collect information from your customer to see how they're using your app when it's out in the wild. And this is also the space where I think there's the most innovation going on, or one of the spaces there's the most innovation going on, because there's a lot of different pieces within Xamarin and within Microsoft that I think will come together over the next few months, and you'll see an amazing solution that's being launched in this space. But we're tying a few things together here. Hockey App was one. Is everybody familiar with Hockey App? So Hockey App is the piece that allows you to distribute a beta app to your users. It's a very easy way. Before it's in the App Store, you can use Hockey App to send that out to all your beta users on iOS and on Android. So that's obviously one key component of this iterate cycle. The second is that you want to be monitoring your app's health over time. So you want to know when there's a crash that occurred, you want to see the user journey that led up to that crash. You want to see what operating system it occurred on, what device it occurred on. And Hockey App is what enables you to do that as well. There's a legacy product from Xamarin called Xamarin Insights, which is being folded into Hockey App, and so a lot of that power is being built in from that point as well. You also want to understand your users. So having a tool like Hockey App, you can know, okay, my users are coming from the south of France, my users are coming from Africa. You can see what languages they're speaking, what language their device is set in. So really understanding who your users are can influence the direction that your app takes. What new releases should you build? If you don't have an Android version of your app yet, but you're seeing that a lot of users are coming from Android, maybe it's time to ship that Android application. And then you can also introduce custom events into your application. So say you've got an e-commerce app, and you're wanting to know how fast it takes somebody to log into your app and to add something to their cart ready to purchase. Maybe that's a KPI that you're tracking. With Hockey app, you can set that, and you can measure how long it's taking people to get through your application. Maybe there's some new feature that you've introduced, and you want to see if users are actually discovering this, or maybe if you need to rework the layout of your application. Hockey app enables you to do that as well. And then finally, maybe the most important part is that it's monitoring your app crashes. So when there's been a crash, you're alerted of that. It integrates in with GitHub, it integrates in with Slack, integrates in with Visual Studio Team Services, so that whatever workflow you're going through, you'll be notified of that crash, and you'll be able to quickly resolve that, push a new release, even reach out to the customer that had an issue in the App Store and say, hey, we apologize, it's been fixed. Please go, fix that 2-star review and make it a 5-star review. So this, again, is where this whole life cycle, I think, is coming together very nicely. When you have VSTS, you have Test Cloud, you have Hockey app all working together, you can imagine a world where a user has a crash, and that's notified in the App Store, and then automatically in Test Cloud it generates, because it knows those steps that a user took leading up to that crash, it populates Test Cloud already with a script that's written and running on that device so that you can test it on your side as well. So this is where I think everything's coming full circle, and again, stay tuned as we release some more exciting products in this space in the near future. So that's kind of the journey from the Xamarin product standpoint. Briefly wanted to mention our Xamarin University product. So this is how you actually get started. This is where you learn how to leverage all of these products. So Xamarin University is our online training platform that enables you to meet these skills that are in such high demand. This is a developer reporting survey that highlights kind of the fastest trending skills, and Xamarin was in the top 5 as the most popular skills that people are learning and that customers are searching for. So Xamarin University is your best place to come to meet that demand. So Xamarin University, we have live trainers that are teaching courses throughout the world. We offer courses on different time zones, ideally flexible to your schedule. They're pretty small class sizes, and you have a lot of one-on-one interaction with your instructor. You can actually have office hours, so you can take your app, sit down virtually with your instructor, and have them walk you through some things that you've got questions on. All of the class materials are recorded and available to you, so you can review those later. So it's a fantastic way to get started learning the Xamarin platform. And you can actually become a certified Xamarin developer. This is kind of that journey. So there's also a lot of Xamarin University content that's made available for free. So if you go to university.xamarin.com/self-guided, there's about 7 courses that you can just watch the videos for. And those courses count towards certification. And then later, as you purchase Xamarin University, you can delve deeper. I think we have now over 70 courses in Xamarin University, everywhere from intro-level topics through to more advanced topics on iOS design and integrating with Azure, etc. Once you've taken the certification classes, you can pass an exam and become a certified Xamarin developer, and kind of have that badge that proves that you've made it. So that's the whirlwind tour of the Xamarin Suite. We wanted to close just by showing a couple other videos of some customers. And I guess this will be a plug as well. So we've done the Xammy Awards, which are kind of over the year we pick the most popular apps, and then our community votes on them. This was the Xammy Award-winning app this past year. So if you're building an app, look into the Xammy Awards, and this could be you next time we're presenting up here. So this is the Dutch Railways and how they've used kind of this whole suite that we've been talking about to deliver an app for their train lines.
Dutch Railways is the national train operator in the Netherlands. The Netherlands has 17 million inhabitants, and 9 million of those are our customers. So whatever we do has a huge impact on society. The app is used by 7,000 people of trained staff. Our trained staff has to simultaneously service our customers and drive the trained service coach is bringing all the information you need at a certain point of time in one screen, only one click away.
Before the app was available, we used the device they provide us. It was a brick with a display. Service coach is changing the way I work because it's modern, it's faster, it's easier to use, so your job gets much more easier. You have more time to answer questions of customers. That's why we do the job.
When I now push the button, I have real-time information. Our passengers want that information. When the train is leaving from another platform, I can see that in the app.
We were developing in C# and we love C#. So obviously when we wanted to go to a mobile platform, Xamarin is your way to go.
It should be very natural for them how it works.
As a designer, Xamarin allows me to reach the whole palette for the native experience and use what they already know and build on that.
It also gives you the flexibility to go over several platforms.
For now we are focusing on the Android platform only, but later on we hope to add iOS or maybe even Windows Phone on top of that. Xamarin gives us the opportunity to add another platform on a later stage with ease.
We found out that Test Cloud, we can do regression tests very fast. That helps us to improve the performance.
We can trust Test Cloud to do its work, so we can release our apps quicker. My favorite feature about the Xamarin platform would be the whole platform as is. I mean, as a developer, I'm really delighted on what I'm getting.
I like Xamarin because it doesn't give me any restrictions on what I think and what I can implement. And with Xamarin, there are no limitations.
Fantastic, and to finish things off before I hand back to Neil and we'll take some questions, wanted to highlight this video. The Coca-Cola bottling company, they've done an amazing job leveraging Azure, and so wanted to highlight this as an example of how Xamarin and Azure are working together to deliver a powerful offline app to their employees.
Coca-Cola Bottling Company Consolidated is the largest independent bottler across the United States.
Most of our account reps stay out on the road most days, so we need mobile solutions. We need mobile solutions that work fast, that can work offline.
We created a tool in which it was very fast, very efficient, and you could have the creative conversation you need to close the deal at the end of the day.
Xamarin is the complete lifecycle solution for creating mobile apps. It allows our team to create apps using the existing C# knowledge, but still create native apps with a very little learning curve. We deploy a variety of devices. Being able to develop for all-in-one is a huge benefit.
Using Xamarin Visual Studio allowed us to have all of our code in one place. Cloud integration with Azure and debugging and load testing and insights all just make it something that it's easy to use.
Xamarin has allowed our really awesome mobile application and backend developers to straddle both worlds. They can go from writing a ASP.NET backend and writing MVC controllers and dealing with the entity framework to doing mobile application logic and how they're going to sync down data from that backend to the mobile application. They can go from literally the front end to the back end, and it's all the same language, same skill set, same frameworks.
Having the ability to have immediate access to the information is critical. When you go into rural areas, often we do not have internet access. So we needed a tool that worked regardless of where they were, whether they're inside a hospital or in rural West Virginia.
SQL Azure and Azure Mobile Services helped us create that connection back to the network when network was not available. We use Xamarin for mobile development, connecting to the Azure Cloud Services for all kinds of syncing and data handling. We also use .NET and Angular for our web-based solution, which also then integrates with Azure Cloud Services.
Xamarin and Microsoft Visual Studio allows any of our developers to solve any of the business problems on any device, on any platform, today and in the future.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all very much. I'm going to hand it over to Neil to wrap it up, and then I think we'll take some questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So let's just recap on what you've heard. You've heard about the mobile market, the sheer unprecedented demand that we've currently got associated with the hunger for brilliant mobile user experiences. We talked about build around that cross-platform, which is lowering that total cost of ownership and providing that very rich, brilliant user experience. We've then talked about enriching applications using Azure backend services. We're then talking about Test Cloud, which is around automating the tests, and the second piece is then distributing those and testing those across thousands of devices. We're then in a DevOps mode then around Visual Studio Team Services and Hockey App, where you're getting deep intelligence about what your customers are seeing, and also the ability to actually get on top of that much, much more. And then the final piece was around the Accelerate. So where an organization wants to build a digital factory, a center of excellence around mobility, then Xamarin University is a fantastic way to set a standard level for expertise within the organization. So we've shared with you some stories around Alaskan Airlines, around the Dutch Railways, and also around Coca-Cola. So we hope it's been useful for you. The final thing that I've obviously told you about is about my daughter Nancy. So if anyone does have a spare iPhone 6, she'd be very interested. Okay, well, I think we're going to take some questions if there are any. Matt and I are going to be here over lunch, so if you don't want to talk about it now, we can handle that later. But if there's any questions, we'd be delighted to answer them.
So does Xamarin support 3D modeling? So if I have a CAD application, can I use Xamarin to do that?
Sorry, does it support what?
Computer-aided applications, so 3D modeling. So if I am writing an AutoCAD-like application, can I use this technology to display on any device?
Yeah, great question.
Do you support WebGL, for example?
Yes, and John might be able to speak to this better, but I've seen examples. For example, there was an app built by a fellow in Scotland, and he was modeling, putting up windmills using CAD. So I know that there's some different components and libraries that you'd probably want to look into that Xamarin supports. But yes, I've seen examples of CAD-based Xamarin app development.
Après, si vous voulez plus de détails, en fait, avec Xamarin, on n'est pas limité sur les API qu'on peut utiliser. Donc en fait, si vous voulez charger vos modèles 3D dans l'OpenGL directement, ou même dans Metal sur iOS, ça ne pose pas de souci. On a accès à 100% des API natives, donc à partir du moment où on arrive à transformer les meshes pour qu'ils soient lisibles dans OpenGL, ça ne pose pas de problème. D'autres questions?
Thank you. Hi. I am currently selling Xamarin in a multiple project, and today for me the main competitor of Xamarin is React Native. What kind of thing I can tell to my customers to show them that Xamarin is better than React Native?
Yeah, great question. So React Native is definitely something that we've seen more. It's kind of on the up, and it's in a lot of ways a good solution. It's giving you a native experience, which is what you want to deliver to your users. And Visual Studio also supports React Native. And kind of our mantra has been to allow what's going to be most comfortable for you. So I would say the most powerful thing is this. And so with React Native, you'll get some pieces of this life cycle, but it's really just on the build piece. So having Xamarin out of the box be able to deliver this full life cycle, I think is one of the most powerful features of Xamarin, now part of Microsoft. And then in some ways it depends on your audience. If you're talking to web developers, maybe they're going to be more comfortable with that. If you already have C# code, if you already have C# developers, then Xamarin is going to be much easier and much more comfortable for them to get started. There's a few other kind of discrepancies as well, and I'd be happy to dig into a little bit more deeper on that, but those would be kind of my main takeaways.
If I could add something. So a lot of the time it's actually necessary to change the conversation and move away, as Matt said, so you're shifting right a lot further. So the data that we've given you about that open signal image that shows the fragmentation of Android devices, if you actually, we're finding that a huge collection of our customers simply do not understand the sheer scale of the problem. So by communicating an integrated solution like that deals with the whole mobile life cycle, that de-risks, as that reference said, it's making it bulletproof. So by having that conversation, a lot of the times, if you are an end customer, then and you're a business partner that's engaging with them, then often a great way of triggering interest is actually grabbing the app and running it through Test Cloud and just seeing what the behavior is like across a huge amount of devices. That's what we do. It's the way we actually approach. So the minute we first meet a customer, we're adding value because we've got a point of view about the level of compliance they have against that broad collection of devices. So something to consider there.
Hello. So I have a question. I have an old version of my application that's written in C#. So if I want to move it into iOS or Android, do you have to rewrite from scratch, or how can I do to move it to use Xamarin?
So the app is written in C#?
Yeah.
So it's an old Windows Phone app, or?
So that's desktop application. So we want to take some component and then use it in mobile.
Yeah. So there's a great tool available to you if you go to scan.xamarin.com. I can share it with you later. I'm sorry we don't have it up on the slides. But it actually will take any C# code that you have, whether it's an ASP.NET app or a desktop application. You can upload that C# code, and it will kind of it will spit out a report that says you'll be able to reuse this much of your existing code to go to iOS and to go to Android. So I'd start there, because you'll be able to see how much of the code you'll be able to reuse. And then obviously, as that slide I showed earlier that has the shared code base, all of that C# code, whether if it's business logic and data access layer, it will sit there. You'll have to do some UI tweaking, and that will be new code that you'll have to write. But there is a lot of code that you can likely reuse as you move to iOS and Android. And John, if you've got other comments on that too.
Yeah, basically after the break I will do a small session and I will tell you about how you can architect your application in order to reuse this kind of code. So I will put the emphasis on this kind of things.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the presentation, actually.
Thank you.
I did have a similar question regarding existing application already written Objective-C or Swift. Have you already worked on bridges from these languages to C#?
Yeah, good question. So the way that we see that happen most commonly, so you go back to that slide that said anything you can do in Objective-C or in Java or in Swift, you can do in Xamarin. That includes existing apps, right? So or components or libraries. So what we see often is if you have an Objective-C built iPhone app and you want to move it to Xamarin, the first step is putting a native wrapper around that Objective-C app that allows you to bring it into your Xamarin application. So it's a C# wrapper that goes around the Objective-C code and allows you to start with Xamarin. Now, that code you won't be able to share across iOS and Android because it will be specific to iOS, but it will run within the Xamarin kind of ecosystem. And so from there, you'll need to start kind of translating your Objective-C code into C#. So there is some manual work that goes into that. But I have examples of several customers who that's where they've started. They already started building an iOS app. They realized that they wanted to deliver Android. And instead of having two separate apps, they decided to merge their Objective-C app into Xamarin and then go translating the code into C#.
Hello.
Hi.
I would like to know the percentage of application made with Xamarin Form vs Xamarin iOS and Android. If you have the number, I don't know.
That's a very good question. I wish I had a good number for you. It's hard to even know the number of Xamarin apps that exist because there's no, you don't have a runtime license, so we don't even know how many Xamarin apps exist in the world. I would say that the Xamarin Forms has become more popular than we ever anticipated, if I'm honest. And I guess, just to talk a little bit to that, Xamarin Forms is ideal for kind of proof of concept and forms-based applications. So if you're building an app to track expenses or to request time off, that's really just kind of forms and not a lot of intensive UI, Forms will be best suited for that purpose. The traditional Xamarin approach, if you're going to build the next Snapchat or the next Facebook, maybe you'll want to use the more traditional Xamarin approach. But a lot of it depends on the developer. It depends on where you're most comfortable. It's easier to get started with Xamarin Forms, but I would also caution you to make sure that you really dig in and understand what's happening on Android and iOS, because you'll have a better experience if you do that.
Yeah, we are seeing the enterprise customers that want to build enterprise applications for general employees that are on the move. Then Forms is a great way to start because they want a great experience, but they don't need that completely fine-tuned UX. So therefore, Forms is a fantastic way to distribute a very broad collection of apps to those employees very efficiently with a lower total cost of ownership.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll take one last question and then we'll have the break. So if anyone has a question, welcome. Yeah.
Hi. Can we have on the same project Xamarin Forms native UI and XAML Forms UI?
Yes, yeah. So within, I think the question was, can you have Xamarin Forms and the traditional Xamarin in the same application, right? Yes, so the answer is yes. So for example, if you have a login screen that you don't care as much about the UX and you want to just do that in Xamarin Forms and have that for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, you can have that one screen be built in Xamarin Forms, and then the other screens you can do in the traditional way where you have maybe more flashy UX and things like that. So yes, it's a mix and match between the two if you want.
And John, just to close out, a lot of our organisations that we engage with across the world want a very quick way of getting their technical team started. So if you actually just Google Xamarin University, there's a start a trial, and what that gives you is the content that Matt was referring to on the far left, which gives you access to about nine hours of education. It actually does count towards certification, but it will provide any team with a 101 around Xamarin and really how to get started. So I strongly suggest you look into that for you and your team should that be of interest to you. But John, we'll send that out as a link as well as part of the wrap up. I think we're done. So thank you very much, everyone. Real pleasure.